Well, good morning and thank you for being here. My name is Heather Williams. I am with Premier First Responder Psychological Services, and the last time that I taught here at Long Beach Fire, I worked for the Orange County Sheriff's Department as the Regional Peer Support Coordinator. And so over the last many years of teaching Long Beach Fire, I kind of went from being a program director in victim services, responding to critical incidents at the request of law enforcement, going to the Sheriff's Department with peer support, and now I have taken that next step in my career and started my own practice. I'm now a licensed psychologist and started a practice in November of 19, so right on the front end of a global pandemic, and I am a bit blown away by how busy I am actually, but very blessed also. So I'm happy to be back and be in this next chapter and be with all of you again. And this topic, I will tell you, I have seen burnout and compassion fatigue over and over again in my office, from firefighters, from paramedics, from police officers, dispatchers, emergency room nurses, ICU nurses. It runs the gamut. And so, as a reminder of everything that we've been through in the last year, which you don't need a reminder because you live it, we've saw this blob, right? This picture, this blob, and we thought over a year ago, what is this thing? What is this COVID thing? And what exactly does this mean? Pandemic. And so as a result of this pandemic, those with essential jobs were mandated to work, right? You have an essential job. First responders have essential jobs, but a lot of people questioned, what is an essential job? And I also want to make a statement about your leadership, about just really everybody who's living and breathing in the world right now. Unless you're 100 years old, you have not lived through a global pandemic. Your leaders have not. Our leaders at the state level, at the federal level, nobody has been through this. And so trying to figure out who's essential and who's not, and what does that even mean, became quite a challenge for people. And so, as firefighters and fire paramedics, you have had to endure different rules, different policies and procedures regarding masks, not wearing masks, wearing masks, and so forth. And I know that that has caused some strife. I also know that as COVID started to increase in your department, it started to spread like wildfire because that's what viruses do. And you were being faced with addressing the homeless, addressing people with medical ailments, medical issues, fear of COVID, so responding to people having panic attacks and heart attacks and all sorts of things, in addition to the stress of COVID and the fear maybe that a lot of people have had in bringing it home. So it changed our life. It's continuing to alter the way that we live our life, and I'm hopeful that we're on the right path to going back to our normal. But ultimately, what I've seen in my office is this issue of not having control, and this feeling of not having control, and feeling that this control is like a blanket that's suffocating people. And so that's a lot of where our anxiety comes from. That is where the depression comes from, and oftentimes the anger and all the other things that we're going to talk about today. So during this time with COVID and the pandemic, connection has been very important. People need connection. That's actually a basic human need. We talk about food, shelter, safety, water as basic needs. We also need connection as human beings. And what this says by Brene Brown is that I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. And so it's important to recognize as human beings that we need connection to people, and we need it without judgment. We need to feel safe, and we need to be able to feel supported by the people around us. And I know a lot about this fire department. I hear things, obviously, and I know that this is sometimes a missing component here with some people. And so I just want to remind you that with everything that everyone's been through, that we need connection and we need to be supporting each other through it. Grieving, the uncertainty. So what happens when we feel that we don't have control and we are forced to live life in a different manner? We tend to grieve, but we don't think of grieving in this manner. Typically, we think of someone dying, someone close to us, a friend, a family member, etc. And the grieving that I'm referring to here is grieving in what was, right? What was our life? What was our ability to do things versus what we have endured over the last year? It's what we're missing. And it's also wondering, when will it go back to normal? And I feel the exact same way. I'm like, I'm done with this. When are we going back to our normal? When can we travel again? When can we do things without wearing a mask or creating more fear, really, about everything going on? Because there is fear of the unknown. And not only did we deal with COVID as fear of the unknown, we also dealt with the politics of last year that rolled into this year. And let's just say I heard a lot regarding that as well. And with the politics, what does a new president mean to my family, financial future, my rights? I've heard a lot of that in my office, and I'm not here to talk about politics, but I am here to talk about the impact that last year had on everybody. Then the new topic that has shown up in my office is, should I get a vaccine? Should I not get a vaccine? What are my thoughts on it? How do I feel about it? What are my fears about it? And so those questions came up quite a bit and continue to. When I think about burnout, and I read this recently, it made a lot of sense to me. All of us charge our cell phones, right? You plug in your phones, you make sure you have a charge in them every single day, at least once a day. Why aren't we doing the same thing for ourselves, where we're actually plugging ourselves in and recharging our battery? And that means a lot of different things to different people that I'll address in a minute. But the idea is, if we're going to charge our phones to have access to them, we need to be taking better care of ourselves and recharging this battery as well. Burnout is actually being added to the diagnostic manual that psychologists and doctors use. And so medical doctors will be able to diagnose someone with burnout, psychologists will. And so we really do need to learn to normalize it and talk about it rather than making it something stigma. It's not weakness. It is doing the kind of jobs that you do naturally can create burnout without having time off and things to distract ourselves in a positive way with. This statement says, helping professions are at a higher risk of burnout because the passion to make a difference and help those in need overrides the need for self-care that ultimately puts the helper in need of support. We're so focused on helping others that we don't spend the time recharging our batteries to help ourselves. And as you're going to learn through the next few minutes, burnout is, I'm sure you're going to identify with many of the things that I'm talking about today, but burnout will oftentimes lead to compassion fatigue. So what causes burnout? Well, it usually starts with a passion to excel in the work that you do. Many people who go into public safety are type A personalities, and a drive to help and a drive to make a difference. And so the long hours, your busy station, some of you are at busier stations than others, feeling little to no control over your work. Think about your jobs. Your jobs are already reactionary. You get called when someone else calls 911. It's not like you're standing by waiting for something to happen. So that reaction creates a feeling of not having control. Lack of recognition for good work. In every public safety department that I work with, I hear this over and over again. It's not that you need a trophy to say you've done a good job, but every once in a while to hear, hey, I appreciate what you've done, or I appreciate you going the extra mile. That matters. As human beings, we want to feel appreciated as well. Unclear or mixed message about job expectations, work and life imbalance. You know, a lot of us grew up in a culture or a generation where it's work and provide for our families, and your titles and your positions are part of your identity and part of your ego and part of all these things that are important to us as humans, but then we don't find the balance in life. And so I'm really going to push and challenge you today to try and find that balance, because balance can equate to health and wellness. Trying to be everything to everyone is part of that balance. A chaotic or high pressure environment, well, look what you do for a living. You don't walk into calm environments a lot of times. They are chaotic, and that can take its toll. And then the lack of social and family support. I cannot stress this enough. In my dissertation, I wrote about building resiliency in public safety. And one of the themes that popped up over and over again was the topic of support. Support from the top down, from your chief all the way down. Support at your level with your partners and the people that you work with day in and day out. Support from a peer support level, and support at home. And so I cannot stress it enough how important having support is, especially working in public safety. Personality traits that can lead to burnout, that perfectionistic tendency, nothing's ever good enough, that type A personality, that high achieving. And type A's are amazing people with an amazing drive. However, type A's typically struggle to ask for help. And so that's another reason I'm here, is to give you permission as a human being to ask for help. It takes enormous strength to ask for help. Pessimistic view of yourself and the world. Well, of course you're going to have a pessimistic view of the world. Look what you see. Look at what you experience. Look what you go to. Again, someone's not having a good day. And so to see the worst of the worst, it makes it difficult sometimes to not get cynical and be pessimistic. So one way of coping with that is trying to remember that not everybody in the Long Beach community are bad doing bad things. In fact, the majority of the Long Beach community are good people doing good things. It's just you get called to the bad stuff. All or nothing thinking, I see this and hear this a lot in my office as well. It's either all one way or it's all the other way. And that can be with the way that you perceive the department, that could be with drinking, that could be with food, that could be with a lot of different things. And so I want to remind you to focus on moderation, somewhere in the middle. Have your drinks, have your food, have your video games, have whatever you have, but do it somewhere in the middle so that your relationships don't suffer as well. Lifestyle traits that can lead to burnout, working too much, burning the candle at both ends, literally. I know that overtime is good. I know that it helps provide for your families, for your travel, for your toys, but not having balance in your life causes more problems in your relationships at work and at home. So I really want to encourage you again to have some balance in there. Living outside your financial means. If you did not work one overtime shift, could you live within the scope of your salary? That's an important question, because if you can't and there's more pressure to work overtime, that's going to cause more burnout and more stress and maybe even more resentment at home as the provider. Lack of close supportive relationships, taking on too many responsibilities and not getting enough sleep. Sleep across the board is what shows up in my office probably 90% of the time with public safety, is not getting enough sleep, working shift work, being up in the middle of the night 3-4 times, 3 days in a row. I recently talked to someone who works in the fire service and he got 6 hours of sleep in 3 days because he works for such a busy station. That's not healthy. So it's, what do you do in between? What can you do to take those little naps? How can you meditate in between runs to be able to recharge the battery and the energy in our brain and in our body? Here's a checklist about burnout. And so just quietly to yourself, maybe look at this and see if this applies to you. Have you become cynical or critical at work? Do you dread going to work? Have you become irritable or impatient with partners, patients, your family at home, your kids, your dogs, your spouses, significant others, and partners? Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? Do you lack satisfaction from your achievements? Do you feel disillusioned about your job? Are you using food, drugs, alcohol, pornography, video games, gambling to feel better or to simply just numb yourself out and not feel at all? These are the things that I see in my office. Have your sleep habits or appetite changed? So when we become highly stressed or serotonin levels in our brain that fluctuate and get low, those things cause depression and anxiety, and depression can oftentimes affect our appetite hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin can make you excessively hungry because of an overdose of it in our body, or less of a production of it and make you not be hungry. So those are, again, some signs of burnout. Are you troubled by unexplained headaches, backaches, or other physical complaints? If you answered yes to some of those questions, you may be looking at burnout. Physical symptoms of burnout: feeling tired all the time, lowered immunity, frequent headaches or muscle pain, change in appetite, again, or sleep habits. The emotional symptoms of burnout: a sense of failure and self-doubt, feeling helpless, trapped, or defeated. I've had people who work in the fire service say, I feel trapped in this business. I don't know what else I could do. I don't know what other skills I have, or I have 10 years left. I'm not ready to retire, but I also feel trapped. Detachment, feeling alone in the world, a loss of motivation, increasingly cynical and negative outlook, decreased satisfaction and sense of accomplishment, and feeling anxious. So again, you can see that burnout are things that can look emotional, behavioral, psychological. The behavioral symptoms: withdrawing from responsibilities, procrastinating, isolating yourself. And the procrastination is really an underlying issue of anxiety. And that is something I've also seen quite a bit in the last year, is the lack of motivation, procrastination that start at work, then it filters into the home life. It causes conflict at home because your honey-do list isn't getting done and there's no motivation to do it. Excessive aspirin and acid, nicotine, caffeine, things to stay awake, things to help you go to sleep. Taking out your frustration on others. And we're going to talk in a minute about what that might look like. Calling in sick more than you used to. You just don't have the motivation, desire to go to work. The medical consequences of burnout: heart disease, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, especially in women, and type 1 in men, stroke, obesity, and depression as well. And so when we don't deal with what's bothering us and we don't talk about what's bothering us, these are some of the medical issues that come out of that. You go on these runs all the time. You see people having panic attacks who think they're having heart attacks. So that's another sign to me that this is very global per se. The increase in mental health issues as a result of this pandemic is far-reaching. Researchers don't even have a full number yet, but I have read articles that say suicides have increased, depression and anxiety has increased, medical issues like this have also increased, as well as sexual dysfunction. There are 3 types of burnout. This is adapted from a woman named Maslach. She's a doctor, and she actually is really the expert in burnout. So this was taken from her. Energy to exhaustion spectrum. There are different spectrums. And so what this means is this is the emotional element of burnout. And it's most noticeable in your lack of energy. So all of a sudden, physically, you're not feeling as energetic. Emotionally, you're not as energetic. And you're kind of at your wit's end. You can't process information. Your patience level is 1 to 0. And you might say things like, I'm drained, I'm mentally exhausted. And how does that relate at work? And then how does that relate for you at home? Because at times when someone's mentally drained and mentally exhausted, they don't have the capacity to listen or be present for their loved ones at home. And so I want to really encourage you to talk to your significant others, whoever you live with, wherever you go home to, and be able to say, this is what I need to transition from 3 days on, 2 days on, whatever it is, to going home. It is a transition process for your brain and your body, just as it is a transition for your loved ones at home to having you home. And so this shows up in my office a lot as a source of conflict. And what I will encourage you to do is to be able to tell your loved ones at home, I need 30 minutes when I get home. I need an hour to shower, have my coffee and breakfast, and sort of decompress from the last 3 days. But if you don't communicate what your needs are, your anger, your resentment, and your potential burnout could increase. This is the easiest one for you to notice because you're experiencing it, and it's easy for others to see it as well. But it's also the easiest to ignore. It's easy to just say, I'm just tired because of work. I'm tired because I didn't sleep. And it's not just about sleep. It's about a lot of other things that we're talking about. Involvement to cynicism spectrum is the mental element of burnout, and this leaves you feeling negative and disconnected from other people or your work. So it's not just a physiological fatigue, a mental fatigue, but it's also this negative, disconnected self. And remember at the beginning, I said how important connection is for all of us. Also, other people are more likely to notice this aspect of burnout before you. It shows up in your negativity, especially if that's not typical for you. If you're this happy-go-lucky guy or gal and you come in, good morning, good night, and all of a sudden your behavior changes. You're negative about everything. Everything is, negative, and it's MFing this and MFing that. That's a sign that something's definitely going down. Signs you're experiencing burnout along the spectrum, asking yourself questions about your purpose. What is my purpose? Do you feel that you have purpose and meaning in the work that you do? Are you getting easily irritated or angry with colleagues? Feeling detached from what you're doing. It's just another run. Patients don't mean anything anymore. Sort of numb. And don't get me wrong, the work that you do creates a desensitization. You're going to compartmentalize and you're going to feel desensitized to certain things. But are you so detached that you don't remember why you do what you do? And I want you to remember right now, what is your purpose? Why did you sign up to do this job? Imagining or fantasizing about leaving your job. Efficacy to inefficacy spectrum. And so this is the behavioral element of burnout. And this is often the hardest one to recognize and understand because it's how you're responding to your environment. And it's the level of perceived productivity and control that you have over your environment. You may start thinking things like, I feel so unproductive, even though I'm really busy. I'm so busy, but I don't feel like I'm getting anything done. You start comparing yourself to others and feel like you're not measuring up. I've heard this as well. Experience imposter syndrome. Well, what is that? Feeling like you're faking it. You're faking it through this job. You're faking it through being happy. You're faking it with what you know and don't know. And a lot of that has to do with maybe being new on the job and trying to learn so much in a short period of time. Or it's someone who is just not happy anymore and is faking it to just be there because you have you need the income and you have a job to do. A disconnect between your perception of how productive and effective you are. And I also want to remind you that burnout is contagious. Not contagious like COVID and a virus, but contagious in the sense that your personality, the energy that you put off, if you're negative and you're walking around the station, around everybody else, that negativity is felt. And so when someone's burned out, they are giving off a negative energy that affects everyone else at home, at work, and everywhere that you go. It's almost like you're wearing it. When we talk about anger, I have this show up quite a bit. I'm angry. My wife says I'm angry. My kids say I'm angry. I'm angry. And the thing that I really want you to resonate with is that anger is very much a surface emotion. And just like this says, where there is anger, there is always pain underneath. And so what anger does is it creates issues with our memory, problems concentrating. It causes irritability, being short-tempered, having bad thoughts about doing harm, not necessarily suicidal thoughts or homicidal, but just being really angry and violent. And so as a surface emotion, a surface reaction, it can be any number of these things that's really causing us to feel angry. It could be the grief that works not the same. It could be shame, embarrassment. It could be sadness, feeling no control, helplessness. I will tell you that helplessness is huge in this job. Fire, police, dispatch, not being able to help someone, not being able to save their lives when that's what you signed up to do is a natural byproduct of being a helper. It's helplessness. And so I want to normalize that for you because it is absolutely a normal response to the work that you do. Again, you signed up to help people on different capacities. Insecurity, sadness, fear. Just yesterday, I was debriefing Orange Police Department after the active shooter incident that happened a week ago. And I heard a lot of anger. And the anger really was the surface for the sadness and the helplessness that they experienced not being able to save lives. I know the Orange Fire Department felt the same way. Symptoms of anxiety. Constant overwhelming worry and fear. obsessive thoughts, sleep disturbance, feelings of panic, heart palpitating, cold or sweaty palms, and the rabbit hole thinking pattern. And what I will tell you is you already know what anxiety is and you know what panic attacks are because you respond to people and patients out in the field. But when you're experiencing it and you don't think that you should be because you're stronger than the people out in the field, I want to remind you that the thoughts that we have are what contribute to the anxiety that we experience as human beings. And so how I see anxiety is a spectrum. You have people who will say they have zero anxiety, and you have people who have paralyzing anxiety and panic attacks and can't leave their home. There are a lot of people in the middle. And it's not uncommon with high stress jobs and the things that you see and experience, the trauma and the critical incidents, that anxiety kind of sneaks up on you. And so I want to remind you that your thoughts are powerful. And what happens with our thoughts that cause us to go down that rabbit hole are oftentimes the what ifs. What if I don't get the promotion? What if my wife doesn't, whatever? What if? What if I don't get this station? What if my partner? What if my boss? Those what ifs cause us to go down that rabbit hole or spiral. And so I work with people in my office every single day to catch themselves on the what ifs, because a huge coping strategy in that is taking a negative what if, catching yourself and saying, okay, stop, and plugging in a positive what if. What if I do get that promotion? What if my child is born healthy? What if positive, positive, positive? And that helps kind of turn the way that we're feeling about the situation. There are different types of anxiety, from generalized anxiety disorder, which is persistent and unrealistic worry, the panic attacks, which you probably see this all the time. And I will tell you that based on my clientele who have panic attacks, it's a scary thing. It can feel like the world's closing in, that claustrophobic feeling, or even people who can't breathe and think they're going to die. Obsessive compulsive disorder is another form of anxiety. And I have seen more and more health anxiety since the pandemic started, where people are fearful of getting sick, of getting COVID, of dying from it, or bringing it home and giving it to somebody else. So it's manifested in many, many different ways. Compassion fatigue. So this quote, the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. Think about that quote for a second. Working in the fire service and expecting to not be impacted by what you see and what you hear and what you smell and what you experience is about as unrealistic as trying to walk through water without getting wet. So what is compassion fatigue? It is feeling burdened by the suffering of others. And not only are you feeling burdened by their suffering, you actually have a reduced capacity for empathy. You actually start blaming them that, well, if you hadn't been here, you wouldn't have gotten hit by the car. And if you weren't, involved in gangs, you wouldn't have gotten shot. Those are accurate statements, but how is that helping you help others? And how is that helping you help yourself? Isolating yourself, feeling numb, and having a loss of pleasure in life. For people who start to lose the ability to experience pleasure across the board with family and friends and coworkers and hobbies and interests and just life in general, over 2 weeks, if you have a loss of pleasure and this persistent sadness, that's depression. Difficulty concentrating. So what happens when we get overly stressed or we're dealing with compassion fatigue or depression is cortisol, our stress hormone, impacts our memory. It impacts our ability to focus and concentrate. Physical and mental fatigue as well. And then a lot of people will bottle up their emotions because they don't want to talk about what's bothering them. There's still stigma and there's still a culture in public safety that we need to work on fixing and changing. And it's going to take us all to allow each other to be human beings and be able to talk about what bothers us. That's why you have peer support. That's why you have your mental health professionals to reach out to and to talk to. More compassion fatigue. And I kind of picture it as your give a shit meter, right? We all have them, and some of them are pretty empty. And it can also increase insomnia and nightmares, give us feelings of hopelessness and feeling powerless. Again, this emulates depression in a lot of ways. Complaining about work and personal life. If you have peers that you hear constantly complaining about their work life and their personal life, that's an opportunity to check in. I don't care if you're on peer support or not. Hey man, you seem really negative, or you seem really upset about home right now. What's going on? Give your peers, give each other the opportunity to have safety and being able to share without judgment. Excessive eating, driving, using substances. When people feel out of control, this is many ways in which they try to take control. And I've had folks say to me they go 180 miles on the freeway in a motorcycle. That's troubling. That's a red flag. So not having control, trying to gain control wherever they can. Poor self-care. You know, all of a sudden people aren't looking the same that they did. They're not taking care of themselves the way that they were. They're not working out. Maybe they're not showering, you know, just basic stuff that we can look at. Receiving complaints about your attitude. If you're getting complaints about your attitude and patients are complaining or your coworkers are complaining, that needs to be a red flag to say, all right, these complaints mean something. What's going on in my life that needs to be addressed? And being in denial. I know people who are in denial about it too. This pandemic has also triggered people's past traumas. And I'm going to give you a very quick science lesson when it comes to trauma. These little blobs basically is your brain, and there are circuits in your brain. And what happens is the part of our brain that holds memory is our hippocampus. And our hippocampus has all these little memories in them, kind of like files. And what COVID did with a lot of people is it stirred up that fear of, I'm not safe, I don't have control. And then it triggers other memories and other times in your life where you didn't feel safe and you didn't feel in control. And that is what a trigger is. That is how post-traumatic stress works. That is how anxiety works with trauma. And so the pandemic did trigger a lot of different traumas for people where they would say, I remember 20 years ago when, I remember 30 years ago when. And now they're more fearful and they have more anxiety as a result. And when you're used to fixing and taking control of your life and your situations and other people's, and all of a sudden you can't, it provokes more anxiety. These last few minutes are about coping strategies. I've inundated you with burnout and compassion fatigue and anger and trying to help you understand and give you a foundation in that. And now I want to teach you ways to cope with this, because we've got to find a way to empty out our water bottle when it gets full. So this is something that I do in my 8-hour training classes. This is something I do in my office. And I'm going to encourage you to do this as well when you're feeling stressed. When you feel stressed and out of control, I want you to make a list of everything that has caused you to feel that way. So you just make a list, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the things going on in my life I don't have control or I feel stressed about. And then from there, I want you to assess each one and put a C next to any of them that you feel that you can change or fix or have control over. For example, let's say you've wanted to lose the 15 pounds that you've gained because of COVID. Well, is that something that you have control over? That would maybe you put a C next to that. And the ones that you have C's next to, those are the ones that you're going to focus on, and you're going to create a plan to attack your goals. The ones that don't have a C next to them are the ones that we're going to let go of, because we can't fix someone's perception. We can't change the way someone drives. We can't change the personalities of our bosses or whoever's bothering you. It's focusing on what you can control and change and learning to let go of what you can't. And for some people, that is giving it to God, giving it to the universe, just throwing your hands up and saying, okay, I give up, because this isn't something I have control over. And you will find that by focusing on what you can change and control, you will feel better overall. Responding versus reacting. So when we don't get enough sleep and we don't go to REM sleep and we don't produce serotonin, because this is where we produce serotonin isn't during REM, we can become very emotional in our responses. And so although as firefighters and paramedics, you may feel that you come from a more logical place, when we aren't sleeping, we are impatient, we can snap, and we can have more of an emotional reaction. And so how we kind of mitigate that is through sleep, but also identifying your triggers. What triggers you? What gets you hot? What gets you angry? What makes you want to attack or bark back? And slowing it down and thinking about responding rather than reacting, because responding has so many more opportunities for problem solving, long-term healthy communication, rather than fighting and conflict and everything else that comes out of this. And this has been a big aspect of the politics, the George Floyd incident, the riots and the protests and everything that you guys have dealt with. Is it's hard to be reasonable with someone when they're coming from a place of emotion. And one of the things that really resonated with me during that whole time frame, and even now, is that people were made to feel as if they had to pick a side. You were either pro law enforcement, pro public safety, or you were pro the other group. And I said this over and over again, and I continue to say it. You never had to pick a side. You can believe that law enforcement is inherently good. Are there bad apples in every aspect of careers? Absolutely. Bad apple firefighters, bad apple police officers, bad apple attorneys and psychologists and doctors and teachers, and I could keep going. A very small percentage. But inherently you support law enforcement while also believing in equality and fairness and justice. Why can't we do both? Why did we have to pick a side? But to have that discussion when someone's having a reaction rather than responding, it's hard to reason with someone who's in an emotional place. Coping strategies. Reframe the way you look at work. If work is causing you to feel burned out, try to find value in what you do. I have a slide and I can picture it in my head. It's about remembering your purpose. Going back to day one, when you decided, I'm going to work for the Long Beach Fire Department, what was your purpose? Why did you feel driven to work in public safety? Because if you can hold on to that, all the other spinning things around you aren't going to matter as much. Find balance in your life, make friends at work, delegate tasks if you can, ask for help, hire, people to garden or come clean your house or whatever you need to do to help create more balance for you and your family. And take time off. When negative thoughts consume you, stop it and replace it with something positive. This is actually a term called thought stopping, and I do go over that in my office quite a bit as well. And limit time with negative people. Remember that we all give off energy. And so if you're constantly surrounded by negative people, what do you need to do to feel better? Get away from them. Limit how much time you want to spend with them, whether it be at work or at home. Invest in positive relationships and set boundaries. There's nothing wrong with setting boundaries and saying no right now or not right now, but yes in a few minutes or yes in an hour or tomorrow or the next day. It's okay to take care of yourself. That's part of recharging your batteries. I also want to encourage you to limit the media and social media. It is noise. We receive noise from so many inputs these days, it's unbelievable. The billboards we see driving, the computers, the news feeds, the actual news media, things scrolling across the bottom of the screen. It is very hard to stay away from the noise. But this is the control you have. So maybe you allow yourself to watch the news a couple times a week for 30 minutes or 20 minutes. But if you are working in a station where you have the news on all day long, I'm going to encourage you to turn it off. Put on music, put on something funny on YouTube, do something different, but receive positive noise rather than the negative noise. And the same thing with social media. I know that people who are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all these social media sites were being more stressed out and having more anxiety and more anger because of the types of posts that they were reading during this last year. There is also a type of breathing called tactical breathing. And basically what this does is it takes your nervous system. So when you're in a sympathetic state, your nervous system, you're kind of spinning, right? You're flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. One of the best ways to reduce your sympathetic state to go into a relaxed parasympathetic state is through breathing. And I know this seems basic, but it's amazing how it works. You have to take a deep breath in through your nose by the count of 4. You hold for 4, and then you slowly exhale out of your mouth for 4 seconds. And what this does is it again affects your nervous system and will calm you down. I encourage you to practice this maybe 3 times in a row. You can do it in your bunk, you can do it at home, you can do it driving, standing in line somewhere, wherever it is that you are. But this will help you feel calmer, more patient, and less angry. I have a lot of people over the years who have said to me, Heather, I feel selfish taking care of myself. I already don't spend enough time with my family. I already work too many hours, and now you're telling me I'm supposed to take care of me too? Yep. And so I want you to think of this. Sometimes it's not me first, but it's okay for me too. Meaning that maybe you have things you need to take care of, but that you also get to set the stage for taking care of yourself, because it really is a gift to all concerned. If you don't empty that bottle out and you don't find a way to decompress and take care of you, what good are you to anybody? You're just a version of yourself that's been depleted. And so it's better to take that hour and work out or decompress or take that shower or whatever you're going to do so that you can be present for other people. Do more of what you love. If you don't schedule time for yourself, you do end up living by default. You end up living in reaction to what everybody else wants from you rather than what's important to you. It's okay to schedule the workouts. It's okay to schedule a massage or a walk on the beach or a vacation or anything else that's going to recharge your battery. Do you have a hobby? This is a deputy. He works somewhere in the United States and he paints on his days off. Do you do woodworking? Do you paint? Do you play a musical instrument? I know guys that are in bands that play musical instruments, people who garden, who do home improvement projects on their time off. What is your hobby? What revives you and gets you ready to come back? There are also benefits to a healthy lifestyle. Yes, there are donuts in here today, but food is fuel. And so what we eat affects our mood, it affects our motivation, it affects our energy levels. And so is it wrong to eat donuts? No. Again, it goes back to moderation and knowing what works for you. It's not just about diet and nutrition, it's also about exercise. Lifetime fitness really does have meaning, and you don't have to train for a marathon. It's just moving. It's walking on a treadmill, it's walking outside, it's getting some fresh air, walking your dogs, whatever it may be. But there's huge evidence that it reduces risk of chronic disease, and the endorphins that you produce mentally actually help you feel calmer. So mind-body connection. There are a number of wellness apps as well. I actually have the Amazon Halo, which is the one in the corner, and it shows me my sleep from how many hours of sleep and then breaks it down between light, deep, and REM sleep. It shows if I have disturbances in the night, and then it gives you tools like, okay, you have low, deep sleep. Here are some things that you can do, meditations you can listen to, activities that will help with increasing deep sleep. And so I really like this app. I also know that people will use their Apple Watch. Weight Watchers has a great wellness app for weight loss as well as fitness activity levels. The Calm app, Headspace, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of these. Plus, there's a ton more apps in your app store. So I encourage you to check it out. Financial health is also very important. Financial stress is one of the most common forms of anxiety and can lead to a number of issues, including divorce. In fact, financial stress is one of the #1 causes for divorce in America. And so if this is resonating with you, I really want to encourage you to utilize your financial advisors if you have them for Long Beach Fire. If you need access to some, I can think of 3 that work with public safety, so that's a resource, as well as Financial Peace University. Financial Peace University is oftentimes offered through many of the churches, through Dave Ramsey as the founder of that. And regardless of your religious or spiritual beliefs, the foundation of knowledge that he provides has literally saved marriages. So great resource that I've heard from a lot of people. Another resource is yoga. And there is actually a website called Yoga for First Responders, and they specialize in providing yoga for police, fire, corrections, and so forth. So I encourage you to check it out. Maybe even that could be something later on down the road to bring them to Long Beach Fire. Meditation is also something that is huge in public safety and actually throughout the world right now. And the reason why meditation is so important is that it really does help teach you to calm your mind down, to recharge your energy. And think about the energy that gets zapped from you with every single run you go on. The energy of people, the energy of the chaos and the noise. Although they can be fun, they can also be draining. And so meditation is a way to get that energy back, and it also teaches you critical skills and self-awareness. And so mindfulness meditation is about learning to be in the present moment. And we are constantly in our head thinking about, well, what's for lunch and what do I have to do? And I'm sitting here in this wellness class, and I'd rather be doing A, B, and C. Instead of just being present and focused in the moment, knowing that you'll get to those things later. And so what it helps you do is not only create more self-awareness of what you're experiencing physiologically and mentally, it also creates increased situational awareness. It can calm the nervous system down. It can increase your cognitive performance, your focus, your motivation, your ability to be present for people, and it also helps with just your overall humanity. More compassion, more empathy, not being judgmental. And with everything I just described, that's a lot of what I hear in my office is not feeling safe to be able to talk about these things because of fear of judgment and lack of compassion or empathy. Another way of coping through all of this is having an attitude of gratitude. What does that mean? Being thankful, having gratitude for what is good in your life rather than staying focused on what is negative in your life. Who do you appreciate? What do you appreciate? Because even in this entire realm of stress and anxiety and burnout, there's still positive going on. Another really effective way for coping is journaling or writing stuff down. It's not Dear Diary. It is, I'm effing pissed. I'm whatever. And being able to really delve into your brain and say, okay, these are the thoughts I'm having. This is maybe why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. Even though I know you guys don't like to do feelings. I call feelings the F word of law enforcement and firefighting. But getting it out on paper really helps to make sense of what it is that we're experiencing in here and get some clarity. And so I have a lot of people who have bought journals. There's a number of different journals in Amazon, or they'll just get a piece of paper or start typing on their laptop. But I really encourage this. I think it's important that we use humor as well as a coping strategy. And this is probably never a good day for a captain to get that call. But humor helps to reduce cortisol and adrenaline. It helps to make sense of the work that you do. It helps connect you all through your gallus humor, right? That inappropriately appropriate humor that you use to cope with all of this. And it reduces stress, anxiety, depression, loneliness, and everything else that goes in it. So please don't lose your sense of humor. Music, calming music, relaxing music, nature music. Some of the things for sleep have to do around music. Go onto YouTube and type in sleep meditation or sleep relaxation music. Music is calming, and certain types of music will actually tell your brainwaves to slow down. So between the tactical breathing and the meditations and the music, you might find that you're able to recharge the battery in between sets or even on your days off to sleep better. Pets are also huge with emotional support and comfort. I have a lot of people who are trying to make their animal support, like emotional support dogs and so forth, but animals have been shown scientifically to improve your overall mental, social, and physiological status. Other ways to take control back: partners who get you, loved ones at home who support you, ongoing education like this, self-care, hobbies, interests, setting boundaries, books, articles, websites, your spirituality, your faith, mental health counseling. You have more control in fixing your burnout or compassion fatigue than you give yourself credit for. And so I really want to encourage you to look at these tools and decide what's going to work for you. And try everything. I tell people all the time, try everything. And if something will stick, Something else might not. You may hate meditation, but you love working out and walking your dog, and that's helping you decompress. There are also other first responder resources. You probably know about Halos for Heroes, started by Jason Cash, as well as the POF. That's the Peace Officer Fellowship, and that is AA meetings for police and fire only. It's closed to just the general population. There is also a project I'm working on right now called Sessions, and Sessions will be an online platform that allows for public safety and frontline medical workers to log on to a support group online. And this is going to be nationwide. So you could be on with someone from New York Fire Department, or someone from Chicago, and you're dealing with like-minded people learning about a different topic. So the topics will vary from anxiety to critical incident stress, sleep issues, integrative medicine, meditation, just different topics in wellness. So this is forthcoming. With the mental health professional, Long Beach Fire is very gracious in providing you with resources, everything from Dugan and Associates to me to other entities. And I think it's important that you understand that although there might still feel like stigma attached to the mental health professional, what they can do for you is be able to bring a neutral perspective. And how I like to talk about it is when you come to see me is we're not talking about feelings, we're talking and we're debriefing. We're processing a call you went on, or an incident, or a situation at home. And if feelings come up, great, but that's not going to be the push from me. It also can provide tools and techniques for problem solving. A lot of what I've talked to today are things I would talk to a client who's sitting in front of me. How can I help you get control back? How can I help you fix what you think needs fixing? And obviously there's client-therapist privilege and confidentiality. Growing up, I actually heard this statement: Heather, stop being a human doing and start being a human being. Think about what that means to you. And the person who said that was Nancy Will, and that was my mom. My mom passed away 14 years ago of breast cancer. And this is something that resonated with me since I was probably 16 years old. And I wanted to share that with you, because what this is a reminder of is that we're so busy doing things, trying to keep ourselves busy, trying to distract, that we stop being a human being and allowing ourselves to connect and feel and think and relax. And so I really want to encourage you to learn how to relax and to learn how to take care of yourself. I also wanted to introduce to you, before I end here, Dr. Rick Zumwalt. Rick is retired from the Huntington Beach Police Department, and he's also a doctor in psychology. He specializes in neuropsychology, brain disorders, trauma, anxiety, depression, and substance abuse and addiction. He is a new addition to Premier First Responder, and he also takes Anthem as well, so he's an option for you. He also played 3 years professional football for the LA Raiders and Atlanta Falcons back in the day. And then his son also played professional football. The services that he offers are individual therapy, pre-employment, psych evaluations. He's certified in that, as well as 24/7 critical incident response, annual wellness check-ins, and training. So I brought him on board to help with being able to help all of you as well. And as I end today, I want you to remember and remind you that in this family, no one fights alone. And I've heard of the animosity. I've heard the pain that has come from this last year. And I really want to encourage you all working here at the fire department to please take care of each other, to have each other's back the way that you would out in the field, have each other's back here. Try to practice non-judgment and more acceptance of each other, and be there for one another. And so while you have each other and you have your peer support program, you also have me, you have Rick, you have Dugan, you have a lot of different groups. So with that, if anybody has any questions or would like to contact either one of us, please don't hesitate to call, text, or email. I failed to mention that Rick's office is in Huntington Beach and I'm in Yorba Linda. So with that, thank you very much and thank you for this opportunity.